Go. Hello, Bill.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
I'm sure the whole Blogging Heads Nation missed you last week.
I read the comments. Some did, some didn't.
Oh, it's all out of love, I'm sure.
For some, yes. For some, no.
I get the same amount of love as you do from what I read.
Well, we do it for the mutual love and affection between us, don't we, Bill?
But you were in Atlanta for a Heritage Foundation powwow, is that right?
Yes, it's called Resource Bank. They do it every year, and this is my first year, and it was huge. There were over 700 people there, think tanks from literally around the world, all committed to the conservative free market cause. It was good times.
And does the Heritage crew party as hard as they work?
Heritage, I mean, there was a cocktail hour, but I would say Heritage is a little more buttoned down than maybe more regular free market types. So there were groups,
not like those crazy folks at AEI,
right, or like Cato or something like that. They're more swingers.
So why don't we get to it?
Sure. It's been a very, very long week in the blogosphere. I think we'd kick off with events from last weekend going into Sunday, which was Barack Obama deciding to appear on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. This was a move that could have gone well for Obama. The underlying issue here is something we've discussed many, many moons ago, which is that Netroots has an ongoing campaign to discredit Fox News, and one of the ways in which they try to enforce that is to put pressure on Democratic office holders, strategists even, to not appear on Fox News, period. And Barack Obama had been behaving very well until this announcement late last week that he was, in fact, going to appear on Fox News Sunday. And immediately there was some worries in the blogosphere about what Obama was going to do. And Matt Stoller had a post kind of worrying and say, is Obama going to betray us here? But then, according to Greg Sargent, the Obama campaign...
Sargent's at a Talking Points memo.
Right, a Talking Points memo. Switching blogs here. And assured bloggers that, in fact, Obama was going to take on Fox in kind of the same way that Bill Clinton took on Fox questioners when it came to his handling of...
that was based on an IM from an anonymous Obama staffer.
Oh, I didn't know what exactly Sargent's source was, but
we don't have a name source.
He cited the Obama campaign.
Yeah.
But anyways, the impression was, the expectation had been set that Obama was going to take Chris Wallace to school on the madrasa stuff, the him being a Muslim stuff, just Fox coverages of his race in general, which then did not happen. Which prompted a stern rebuke from Marcos, who called Obama weak and said the incident exposed his campaign as a bunch of liars. Stoller had very similar comments, feeling betrayed by the Obama campaign, and this prompted a kind of more reflective post, as is often the case with Chris Bowers, on kind of the loss of influence for the Netroots in this election cycle. And that
also, Adam Green from Move On had a Huffington Post post that Obama was outfoxed.
Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head if he was. I don't think he was speaking formally on behalf of Move On. Of course, Move On being a 3 million person grassroots organization, it's hard for any individual to speak on behalf of the organization.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, they have very specific methods that they go through before they, make an endorsement and all the rest of it.
And Move On has endorsed Obama,
right.
And that certainly has not been rescinded in any way. They're still doing their Obama in 30 seconds ad campaign contest. And Marcos, neither Marcos or Stoller have renounced their own support for Obama, although I think Stoller's support has always been more tepid than Marcos's. But this does speak to, and we've talked about this in past segments, the liberal netroots, narrowly defined as the coterie of your more well-known, well-read bloggers, have never really fully embraced the Obama campaign strategy. They chafe at the bipartisan / post-partisan rhetoric from the campaign and from the candidate. It does not square with how they see the path to success lies. And they've generally hung back, even to the extent that there is more support there for Obama than there was, say, 3 months ago. It's still not full-throated because there is a fundamental disagreement in tactic on how to approach the political realm and the media landscape.
Yeah, I mean, to get back to Chris Bauer's post I was talking about, you mentioned Move On's endorsement and Marcos's and Stoller's, and that's kind of the core of Bauer's analysis is that at one point the Netroots was very influential in this race. They were hosting debates for Daily Kos. They were driving the agenda on residual troops. You had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama paying more attention to what was going on. But Chris believes that now that the blogosphere is pretty much already endorsed, again, that's a nebulous concept, but like you mentioned, we have move-ons already come out, Marcos, Stoller, you have. So, now that the blogosphere has essentially endorsed, there's no longer a need to, dare we use the word pander, to their expectations. In this case, that expectation being whether or not someone engages the Fox audience. And I
don't even think that. I think Obama has had a very successful, well thought out internet strategy, broadly defined from the get-go, and has never had a blog strategy from the get-go. And that's something that it definitely chafes on some. In reality, it shows that you don't necessarily need a blog strategy to garner a lot of internet support and build up a strong volunteer network through social networking and whatnot. But what you lack by not having the blog support is you don't have wingmen who are helping you push out messages and arguments when you're in a jam. Throughout this whole 2-month period when Obama has been in the frontrunner's crucible, and every negative that people can come up with, legit or illegit, has been thrown at him, there's been a general hanging back to say, let's see how the new guy handles this, and not a sense of common cause with let's help this guy get over this. I think that is in part because there's this disagreement on tactic. From a liberal netroots perspective, Fox News is at the tip of the spear of what is wrong with the conservative noise machine and them being seen as a legitimate news outlet. They have to be delegitimized if you want to weaken the noise machine that makes things so difficult for us. And it's a different strategic choice for a candidate to make to say, do I want to help weaken this infrastructure by delegitimizing them in the long run, or do I recognize in the short run that there are people watching this network that are going to participate in the primaries that I have to reach?
Yeah, and I think that's a definitely departure from Howard Dean, who definitely did embrace more of the combative netroots ethos and has taken that to the DNC. And it seems,
well, Dean's not running for office right now.
Right. It seems essentially Obama made a decision very early on that, he was going to build his own army and he wasn't going to enlist you guys to help him. He was going to go out and get his own people, build his own movement. But Obama didn't just feed the tip of the right-wing noise machine spear in a kind of global sense by going on there and legitimizing them. In a very specific sense, he made another concession that will change what we see in the upcoming months, and that was that he said that he called Wright a legitimate campaign issue. And everyone from the bloggers on the right definitely noticed. Ed Morrissey's Hot Air.
Well, John McCain noticed.
And more importantly, John McCain noticed. And he switched very quickly. He said, well, if Obama says it's a legitimate issue, then, what the hell, I'll talk about it.
Well, and of course, Obama as a candidate, for better or for worse, does not talk in traditional sound bites. He tends to talk more in paragraphs. I think he successfully talks in paragraphs more than the average candidate does. More often, the average candidate, people will actually listen to the paragraph. In this case, what he was saying was that it's legitimate for voters to question. Because you say it's legitimate to sort of look at what are my set of values, and to the extent that this calls that into question, it's legitimate to ask me about it. he wasn't saying to John McCain, it's legitimate for you to run ads about Jeremiah Wright and make guilt by association charges that are baseless in perpetuity. But obviously the right-wing blogosphere is going to cherry-pick that out to give themselves their own personal cover to say that it's okay. Now, I wonder, after the press conference on Tuesday, if the conservative blogosphere feels they have the same free pass to say what they want to say and think that's going to stick no matter what anybody else says.
Well, to turn the page on what the reaction has been, the answer is a full 100% yes. This issue is here to stay. They feel vindicated. They're seeing a lot of the same questions that they brought up from the get-go being repeated by the mainstream media. And, this is here to stay. I think, when we first talked about this, I said that Obama played the race card. And here's what Jonah Goldberg, not commenting on what I said, but commenting on Obama's second press conference. He says, you know who made this racial thing? Not Sean Hannity, not Fox News, not Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama made Jeremiah Wright a race thing. It was his big race speech that transformed a singular black preacher into the living personification of the black community. He goes on, the whole reason Obama made Wright into a racial issue was that people would shut up, which is basically what I was arguing before, was that Obama was trying to say, oh no, this Jeremiah Wright thing is about race, and we should be talking about that. This is not about my judgment at all. And instead we're seeing, an evolution of that, in that now people are asking that question. Let me read you quotes from also from the corner from Byron, New York. He says, if voters believe that Obama fundamentally rejects Wright's views, they might question Obama's judgment, remaining close to Wright for 20 years. But if voters believe that Obama secretly agrees with Wright, but is putting on another face to an election, then all is lost. And then that is then echoed in the Washington Post, this is the Washington Post editorial after Obama's press conference. From the Post, it seems to us that the whole sorry episode raises legitimate questions about Obama's judgment. Given his long and close relationship, Mr. Obama and Reverend Wright, voters will ask, how could Mr. Obama have been surprised by the Reverend Wright's views? How could he have not seen this coming? So, Obama can think his press conference went well, and he can try to change the conversation, but it only raises more questions about his judgment, about what he knew, when he knew it, etc.
Well, the Washington Post has become a right-leaning editorial page, and I'm sure the conservative blogosphere is going to keep pushing the judgment line. I'm sure they're not going to hold John McCain to that standard about his judgment pursuing John Hagee's endorsement. We're going to talk about that later.
Yes, we will.
I noticed, there is an anonymous superdelegate who is blogging at MrSuper.org, and I'm assuming it's a he because Mr. Super, but I guess who really knows?
It's true.
Who said, clearly the developments over the past few days are significant, but as I've stated before, I can't expect either campaign to control people outside of the campaigns. And there's a difference between who the candidates know and who they take their political advice from. And it seems that Senator Obama's response to this has been well received. As I stated in my initial post, I don't give surrogates that much weight when determining the viability of a candidate. Not Reverend Wright, James Carville, Samantha Power, or Jolene Ferraro. We don't vote for surrogates, we vote for candidates. So to the extent that there are people in certain corners in the conservative blogosphere and elsewhere pushing the judgment line, certainly not consistently applied, it doesn't seem to be having an impact with the superdelegates, which are really the bottom line as far as who's going to get this nomination in the end.
Yeah, and I think we're carrying, or the conservative bloggers are caring about a different audience than you are. Jonathan Martin, again, had a piece in the Politico about the silent treatment that Hillary's getting, in that, Hillary can basically say anything she wants. The conservative noise machine doesn't nary a peep. Everything that they react to, they attach to Obama. And the point of his article was basically that for conservatives, the Democratic primary race is already over and has been for a while, and they're looking to the general. And so that's what all the criticism of the conservative bloggers is aimed towards. They they think the superdelegates will eventually make up their mind in Obama's favor. They've already turned the page.
Right. Obviously, I think the results in Indiana, North Carolina are going to have some bearing, but maybe not.
I think that'll have bearing on how much longer this lasts.
Right.
That is the ultimate question. I don't think you think it. I mean, unless unless Obama loses North Carolina, then that's a game changer. But outside of that happening, I think we're also agreed she's going to be the nominee.
And I did notice, and this is not a blog reference, but Chuck Todd was on MSNBC. I did notice that Jonathan Martin, who blogs at Politico, did a roundup of some Republican consultants who said, effectively, as you were saying, that Wright's still on the table. We can attack Obama's inconsistencies and judgment questions and all that sort of stuff, which I would not say are fair charges. But Chuck Todd had said he had talked to some Republicans privately who kind of sighed. Said, "Oh, maybe this is off the table now, and we could try to bring this up." But he could say, "Hey, we're divorced here. I've unequivocally denounced this stuff, and you can't tag this with me." So I wonder, as far as the conservative blogosphere is concerned, I mean, they've definitely latched on to a anti-Obama narrative, and they show no interest in letting go. I noticed that my old college friend Michelle Malkin, even went as far as to title her recent column "The Jive Talk Express," starting to tread into, racially tinged language again. And maybe what you quote from Jonah Goldberg saying, well, it's Obama who made this a race issue. Now it's okay for us to do this sort of thing. I wonder if that's a very myopic way to go about this, and that could undermine McCain's efforts, Karl Rove's efforts to try to diversify the party and not see the party as being inherently bigoted.
Well, that's definitely McCain's view. I mean, McCain definitely wants to put on that face, and he's going to try to distance himself from the inevitable attacks. But that's not what the larger conservative bloggers believe. And I worked with Chuck Todd and Jonathan Martin before, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Jonathan Martin's sources on this one. I think the closer to the consensus opinion within GOP operatives is that this is all gold, and we'd be fools not to use it.
Well, the flip side of this is John McCain's associations, which have never gotten the same level of scrutiny and media attention as Obama's. But you certainly saw a fresh round from the left saying, okay, well, Obama has now clearly denunciated what Reverend Wright was saying and made it absolutely clear that he does not share these views and he doesn't speak for him. Why isn't that same standard being applied to John Hagee? Talk to Action quotes John Hagee, "As a nation, America is under the curse of God even now because of reproductive freedom and support for the teaching of evolution." Fire Dog Late said, "I anxiously await John Hagee's statement about the Catholic Church being the great whore getting the same kind of treatment." John McCain saw Hagee's endorsement, said he was proud to get it. Why isn't that the topic du jour? And Jack and Jill, one of the more prominent African-American blogs, quoted a news article saying that a McCain advisor acknowledged the campaign failed to look into Hagee's background adequately and said that as a result, the campaign's procedures for vetting endorsers had improved, and making the point, well, what does that say about McCain's judgment? How does it say how he's going to handle things like national security clearance if he doesn't know how to vet his endorsers? So is there any expectation in the conservative blogosphere that trying to hold this guilt by association standard has the potential to backfire when I would argue that it's a silly standard in either respect? Yeah,
no, they're willing to take that bet. I always found the Hagee story mildly annoying until this past Sunday. I was watching CNN, and they had a package on Obama and Wright that went on for about 15 minutes. Had the great YouTube shot of Goddamn America. Had the new NAACP stuff. All beautiful, all gold. And then at the end, they said, they had a little bit about, oh, John McCain has his own pastor problem, Hagee, and, they spent about 3 minutes on it.
That's the way it's gone.
And so I'm for that. If the trade-off is going to be 15 minutes of Obama and Wright and 2 minutes of Hagee and McCain, then I encourage the lefty bloggers to keep pushing this slop. Because
obviously you're going to support if the ratio stays that way. I guess the question is it necessarily going to stay that way?
Yeah, and here's why. Barack Obama is a biography candidate. The voters in Iowa did not choose, Barack Obama over Chris Dodd because of their health care plans. Did not choose, Barack Obama over Dennis Kucinich because Dennis Kucinich hasn't been against the war enough. It's because of his biography. And American people know a lot less about Barack Obama than they know about John McCain. And whatever John McCain's relationship with Hagee is, John McCain never wrote a book inspired by one of Hagee's sermons. John McCain wasn't converted to Christ by Hagee. Hagee didn't baptize his children. John McCain's never been to his church, and all those things are true of Obama and Wright. So,
but isn't by your own standard, isn't it a judgment question about who you pursue for?
Yeah, they're both judgment questions, and one's a bigger data point than the other. So yeah, I think conservatives are willing to have that issue brought up all the time, have the facts played out, and have the American people make their judgment.
Well, the other thing that caught the attention of liberal bloggers in regards to McCain this week, there's definitely an interest in the blogosphere to get talking about issues and get talking about McCain more. This is McCain's healthcare week. He's been doing several events about his healthcare plan.
He had a blogger or a conference call.
I'd love to hear what happened there. In my organization, Roger Hickey had a big post about McCain's plans, and they've adopted the most extreme right-wing ideological approach premised on the idea that the big problem in healthcare is that Americans have too much insurance. In their words, we don't have enough skin in the game, and that only when we have to buy healthcare with money that comes directly out of our own pockets will consumers force doctors, hospitals, and insurance companies to become more efficient. That's the theory, but it's contradicted by the facts. Most of us already pay part of our premiums out of our own pockets. We increasingly have to shell out for copays in order to get to see the doctor. The result in practice is that most people, even those with good insurance, now have to think twice or three times about even getting the regular preventive health checkups. So having lots of skin in the game is that the millions of Americans don't get the health care they need, and it's one reason why health care costs are driven up and not down. I can go on to a couple other ones if you like, but is there any consternation on the conservative side that this is a plan that Time Magazine Swampland blog Karen Tumulty said this is a radical plan.
I agree. I saw on that same site that you mentioned that the Politico characterized it as a move towards the middle, and if anything, is not a move towards the middle. It incorporates a lot of the ideas that we here at Heritage have, and we were very excited to see the plan. But it is definitely not an incremental or It doesn't build off the current system.
To really drive the point home, what's radical about the plan, or at minimum, what's a big change, is it's going to take away the tax benefit that employers get when they offer health insurance to employees, and therefore, if those benefits were given, it would be taxable income that the employee would have to pay, and that's going to be a major incentive for employers to stop providing health insurance altogether. And then you have, in the conservative perspective, you now have a consumer-driven environment. Right. McCain offers a $5,000 tax credit for families to help with that, but the average plan is $12,000, $14,000 right now. So it doesn't seem like the math's going to add up there.
Right. Getting the weeds just a little closer here. Nothing else do we buy through our employers. You don't buy car insurance through your employer. You don't buy cable television through your employer. Only health insurance do you buy through your employer, and it's because of World War II era wage controls. And it's ridiculous. It leads to the rising healthcare costs because it encourages people to bill other people, bill third parties, so people are never seeing what's paid. And the idea behind it is to bring more of a consumer-focused, individuals making their own decisions, healthcare to it. But to get back to other bloggers' response to it, and actually we'll have the Heritage actually posted our own blog. We were in on that conference call, and so you can see our pleasure with the plan. But I liked Megan McArdle's take on it, which is, she said, the plan's heart is mostly in the right place. Break the link between employment and health care, make the plan revenue neutral, change Medicare reimbursement so that we pay for the results rather than the procedures, etc. And then she went on to say, the senator is proposing one thing that I think is a terrible idea, pharmaceutical reimportation. Naturally, that is the part of the healthcare plan with the highest probability of passage. And of course, Heritage also is against, like Megan, the pharmaceutical reimportation plan. And this is not a Heritage position, but I agree with Megan that the rest of the plan, because it is such a new way of tackling the healthcare system, probably would not get passed. Except, if she's right, the problem with the most likely to get passed would be the pharmaceutical reimportation.
That's just importing drugs from Canada? And that's what the Democrats have pushed for a very long time.
Yes, it's true.
and it was filibustered, I believe.
But not by McCain.
Not by
because he's for it. Always has been.
But that's not really the.
It's not the core of it. It's not the core.
That's not the core of his plan.
Megan's point is that this is such a far-reaching plan that it's not going to get passed. However, there probably would be one small part of it that would get passed, and that'd be the pharmaceutical reimportation, which we're against.
But you're not going to see in a general election discussion of the drug reimportation part because both candidates are going to agree on that one piece of it. You're going to have a big, huge, massive difference over the broader contours of the plan. And it just seems to me it's really setting up McCain to have a major general election problem. And you have this healthcare policy marketplace review. This is not even a liberal blog. This is a healthcare expert blog saying, I'm amazed he offered this as a solution. First, he is simply shunting the problem off to states. Second, he implies that one or more states have figured out what to do with people who can't get health insurance because of pre-existing conditions. This is Elizabeth Edwards' point that since she has cancer and he has cancer, neither one of them would be covered by his plan. He doesn't address the pre-existing conditions situation. McCain had theorized that at the state level they'd figure this out, but as healthcare policy marketplace review said, just which state is that? I don't know of a single state that has been able to provide widely available access for health insurance for people who cannot get it. Third, just who would finance this pool? States have tried so-called high-risk pools before, pooling together folks who have pre-existing conditions and the like. Time and time again, they are swamped by people trying to get in there, and there's never enough money. Since they've never worked before, how would they work this time? It just seems like a lot to bite off, and not a lot of political cover from the healthcare expert community to try to sell this in a general election where you're already behind the eight ball running after 8 years of an unpopular Republican president.
Well, let me say this. I don't think anyone in the conservative movement, if they had to pick a spokesperson to sell conservative ideas on healthcare, would pick John McCain. This is part of the reason why conservatives were so slow, and some even still have not, jumped on this campaign, is that when it comes to free market ideas and applying them to the real world, like healthcare, there are people in the conservative movement that understand these issues and can articulate them better than John McCain. So, are we looking forward to seeing John McCain debate this issue? We'd probably rather see someone else like like a Jeff Flake or a Senator Jim DeMint up there. But that's the hand we were dealt.
But your concern is with the messenger, not the messenger.
Oh, well, we can debate healthcare back and forth all day. We have a pretty firm position. But, as far as whether or not, conservatives took be worried about that, no.
You don't think this is a potentially fatal issue come November?
No. Well, a potentially fatal issue, I've been on record, last session before that, I've always thought Obama was going to win the campaign, and I still think that. So I don't know what you mean by fatal issue. McCain's still not going to win.
Well, I guess maybe the question is: are you concerned that if McCain puts out essentially what is largely the dream conservative plan, and gets trounced on that directly in the course of a campaign, is that going to be a major ideological setback for the conservative movement?
No, I don't think anyone's going to look back on this campaign and say, oh my God, that campaign after 8 years of Bush and Iraq and the economy and gas prices was about health care and McCain lost because of health care. No. No one's going to look at it like that.
And the other, of course, the McCain issue this week is the DNC put out a 100 Years ad, not dissuaded by McCain campaign's complaint that he's being taken out of context. But both factcheck.org, which is done by the Annenberg School at UPenn, and the Associated Press ran to McCain's defense and said the 100 Years ad was misleading, and that raised the ire of both the Carpetbagger Report blog and Talking Points memo. Carpetbagger said of factcheck.org, "This isn't fact-checking. It's decrying an ad that might give voters the wrong impression. The DNC," Annenberg argues, "shouldn't create ads that lead some to the wrong idea. It doesn't matter what the ad says," Annenberg concludes, "what matters is some might think the ad means." And just to clarify that, the ad does not say, and this is McCain's always complaint, the ad does not say McCain wants 100 years of war. It does not say that. It says McCain wants to be in Iraq for 100 years, using McCain's own words by saying that's fine with me, and then shows images of war-torn Iraq, which is the Democratic argument, that if you have a plan for a 100-year occupation, that's what it's going to lead to. And you can make a counter-argument to that, but it's not a factually inaccurate thing to say. And that's what Steve Bannon, Carpetbagger, was trying to point out. And Josh Marshall, criticizing the Associated Press's take on this, he said, what McCain is pushing for here is a standard in which any negative ad targeting McCain must be delivered with the McCain camp's own spin in order to be within bounds, a standard few politicians, to say the least, have ever been granted. There is a way foreign policy questions are hashed out in quiet symposia and a way they're fought over in political campaigns. They are not the same. McCain and his surrogates are demanding something no one else gets, namely the right to have their words repeated only in their fullest context and most generous, most amply spun interpretation. He wants his own set of rules, an election with a stacked deck. I don't know how conservatives are feeling about the 100 Years ad, if they're still defending McCain on that point, and do they think that, or I should say, do they feel that there's still a liberal media conspiracy to build up McCain and then destroy him, as Rush Limbaugh tried to argue, I think, a month ago?
Well, I think, one, conservatives feel that they have the facts on their side on this one. We talked about this before. The Columbia Journalism Review was even harsher than the factcheck.org stuff, you just read. Do you agree at least that he is comfortable with a 100-year permanent military presence in Iraq?
If it would come to that, he's just as comfortable with our, going on 60-year commitments in Japan and Germany.
Right. That's his argument. That's a substantive argument. Why can't that be challenged to say we think a 100-year occupation is going to be a disaster?
Yeah, because when you then look at what Barack Obama is saying on the stump, when you look at the images they played, those images aren't what people think about when they think about American troops in Japan today and American troops in Germany today. So that's the dishonesty that fact check is picking up on, because McCain is clearly talking about the model of American troops right now in Germany and American troops right now in Japan, and the pictures that DNC puts on, along with that ad, do not line up with that image. So that's conservatives believe they have the facts on their side. They're glad that the Associated Press and Annenberg Center and Columbia Journalism Review are on their side for once, and they'll keep pressing the issue.
Although it's certainly not deterring anybody on the Democratic side of things. So I guess similar to your sanguineness about the Hagee comparison, are you as sanguine that the 100 years thing is going to be effectively put into a box by an AP Wire story?
No. There's definitely some good media on it, but I think there's going to be a really good Iraq debate coming this fall. Michael Crowley wrote a great piece for the New Republic on just how scatterbrained and fanciful Barack Obama's Iraq policy really is. I have a cousin who guards U.S. embassies, she's been in Greece and Cuba and the Philippines, and Barack Obama has this plan about leaving U.S. troops behind, or he wants to pull most of them out, but he has this vague idea about using the leaving the troop in the U.S. behind, that he says, quote, we do it in France, we do it in Great Britain. The American embassy in France and Great Britain would be a far, far, far cry from a American embassy in Baghdad once American troops have pulled out. Barack Obama's campaign promises, which have already been undermined by his own advisor, Samantha Power, and the other generals said there are going to be people, America should have troops in Iraq, in numbers totaling like 80,000 through 2010, it's a train, about to hit a big train wreck of reality. And McCain's going to be ready for that debate. He's not going to be ready for the healthcare debate. I agree with you there. McCain's going to be ready for this debate, and we'll see if Obama's ready can get away with his very vague promises that pretty much everyone agrees are fanciful, and a John McCain who's going to press him on these issues.
Well, I
would highly recommend that Michael Crowley piece.
I think I can speak for the entire liberal blogosphere that if the fall election is fought strictly over debate over Iraq and debate over health care, that would make us extremely happy. And I wonder if McCain, I mean, we always talk about expectations, and primaries having these expectation games over who's going to win what states and whatnot, and debate expectations. There's going to be a huge expectation that McCain is sharp on Iraq and national security. And I wonder if his performance over the past month in talking about Iraq really matches that expectation.
I don't think he's going to be sharp. I've said before, and Dave Letterman reminds you every night, he's old. So he's never going to be as eloquent as Barack Obama. His advantage is he's going to be a truthful, straight talk, and is going to offer ideas, plans, and strong words, analysis about Iraq that just sounds a lot more realistic than we're going to get everyone out of Iraq in 16 months, I promise, and we're going to leave behind this ninja strike force and some troops to guard the embassy like they do in Britain and France. It's just going to be McCain's straight talk reality and Obama's fanciful rhetoric, and I think that will have an effect. And Obama will be more eloquent.
You're conflating a couple of things here, but the strike force is not just to protect an embassy.
Oh no, the strike force and the embassy protection are different things. They're both very fanciful.
I imagine those will get more fleshed out as that debate gets engaged. They have, no one's really pressed Obama on those points in the course of the primary,
which is amazing considering how much Democrats say they want to talk about issues.
Believe me, I'm sure Obama would love to be talking more about Iraq right now. And even to the Clintons' credit, her ads are focusing on the gas tax and the home mortgage crisis. There's a great interest in talking about issues and a recognition that I think most voters in Indiana and North Carolina want to talk about issues and don't want to talk about all of these manufactured outrages. Well, speaking of which, what Democrats actually want, there's some posts about superdelegates that caught your eye.
Yes. I thought Bowers had a couple of great quotes on superdelegates. One was this realization he has that there is no objective delegate total. There's only the Clinton total and the Obama total. And as he says, quote, what will happen is that both campaigns will fight to make their respective delegates' totals reality, and more than likely the outcome will end up somewhere in between. And his larger point is that it's irrelevant for MSNBC or the AP or Reuters to all have their own delegate tallies and everything else, because it only matters what each campaign believes is their delegate total, and going forward whether or not they can win. And I thought that was very, very insightful and true. I don't expect Hillary Clinton to bow to anyone's pressure until she believes that she will lose, still with the way she believes Florida should happen, the way she believes Michigan should be settled, and now even the popular vote, which is an argument she's bringing along. But
so is he making an argument that this is destined to go to the convention?
He's making an argument that this will go on until enough delegates have come forward to crush her numbers and make Obama the nominee, which he thinks will happen before the convention in June.
I think that's probably a widely shared view, and obviously Howard Dean and others are trying to make sure that those numbers are expressed and tallied by superdelegates before July 1 to avoid it being a brokered convention. The open question then is if you have 2,025 superdelegates, total delegates, new superdelegates come out for hypothetically Obama by then, would Clinton say we're gonna challenge Michigan and challenge Florida and have credential fights and go all the way to the convention anyway? And that's, I think, a much bigger unknown.
Yeah, I think what Chris is arguing there is that you're never going to convince Clinton to give up her Florida and Michigan counts the way she sees them.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think it's going to depend on how many superdelegates come out. If once Obama crosses that 2025 threshold, what's the media spin going to be? What kind of political pressure is going to be put upon her? What's that going to mean for her long-term viability as a politician? That's a hard thing to really get inside her head to figure out. I don't know if any blog post is going to be able to discern that.
We'll see. The other post of Bowers I liked on the superdelegate issue was his idea about what to do about Florida and Michigan's delegates. He said, if I were in charge, I would seat Florida's pledged delegates as is, and seat the pledged delegates from Michigan, 73 Clinton, 55 Obama. From that point, I would strip both states of their superdelegates. This way, the voters of the two states are not punished, but the superdelegates who are responsible for putting both states in this mess are. Which I thought was a somewhat funny and just desserts solution for Michigan and Florida.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it still doesn't speak to the issue that the contests themselves were not legitimate contests, where there was not full-on campaigning by either candidate. Both candidates were able to make their case. In the case of Michigan, Obama and others weren't even on the ballot. So, I mean, there's no pretty solution to this. You know, the situation was botched by the state party leaders in those.
Come on, doesn't the idea of not seating the superdelegates, doesn't that appeal to you just a little bit? Isn't that a little pretty?
I mean, the rules are terrible. Period. But you know, there's no perfect system anyone's going to come up with. You're sure not going to be able to undo these problems in the course of the game. So it seems like these things are just going to be. It's like Florida and Michigan are just going to be off the table for the. There's no way I can see Florida and Michigan being the margin of victory for a candidate, when the case would obviously be Clinton. There would just be blood on the floor of the convention. It would be a massive rift in the party. I just can't say that happened.
Right. I mean, I would agree. I would say that Obama's never going to sign off on Clinton's formulations, but it will.
Anything he's going to sign off on is not going to be to Clinton's benefit. So you're back where you started.
Right. But I mean, Clinton will always hang on to it as a reason to stay in the race.
I mean, if that's true, that she's going to hang on to those things regardless, then it goes to the convention, which is a giant mess.
So we have one last issue you want to talk about, which was a Supreme Court 6-3 decision that came down, Tuesday?
Well, this is the voter ID ruling that upheld Indiana's voter ID law that requires photographic ID to vote. And, you know, as the Florida-Michigan situation speaks to, Democrats are highly sensitive about voting rights in the wake of Bush v. Gore.
Except in primaries.
Well, I think people are upset at the process all around. Obviously, the Clinton campaign is trying to make it a Bush v. Gore style disenfranchising argument, but the fact is there's disenfranchising arguments you can make all over the place. That the voter disenfranchising stance does not fall down cleanly on one side of the issue or the other. I think people on the whole are unhappy about it. In the case of this Supreme Court ruling, it's your constitutional right to vote, and so restrictions on that are something that should be handled very, very delicately, if done at all. And the fact that a largely conservative majority, Stevens jumped on to make it 6-3, although he had a separate opinion, but it was largely conservative. The 5 conservative justices were the bulwark of it. Were able to uphold Indiana's law without having actual evidence of any historical vote fraud in Indiana. And to the extent that historical situations were cited in the past, they were very few and going back into the 19th century. As Rick Hasen's blog noted, Justice Stevens says there's evidence of fraud to justify a voter ID requirement. The actual evidence he cites in the footnotes is incredibly thin, either reaching back to 1868 or a single case of impersonation voter fraud found in a recent gubernatorial election in Washington State. Keying off of that, Jack Balkin, a law professor who blogs at Balkanization, said, "We may conclude that these days you don't really need any empirical evidence to uphold limitations on constitutional rights against a facial challenge. All you need is truthiness," the great word coined by Stephen Colbert. Now, this has some ramification in Indiana because the primary is on Tuesday, although that law was already implemented, so it's not a change in law. It's just a bad law that remains on the books. But it does definitely...
and it's been in the books since the last cycle. So we have actual data on whether or not this law affects voter turnout in any way.
And what does that data say?
Oh, well, it's funny you mentioned that.
Well, I'm curious. I don't know.
Well, it shows that it does not depress minority turnout in any way whatsoever.
Well, I'm not sure how easily you could judge that because there's issues with getting minority populations to turn out as it is. There's already obstacles. Voter ID is just a fresh obstacle.
Yes. Yes, there was a great post by Bradley Smith at the Justice Talking blogs, which is a Federalist Societist blogs, and he said, the plaintiffs were trying to make this case that this law affected people's right to vote, and they were trying to equate affected with disenfranchised. So yeah, there are many different things that affect whether or not people can vote and how easy it is for them to vote, but do they all add up to disenfranchisement? And, you were talking about how there was no evidence that there was voter fraud going on in Indiana. Well, there's also no evidence that this suppressed anyone's turnout. And one of the funny things about one of the plaintiffs in this case, one of the voters highlighted by the League of Women Voters, was denied voting in Indiana because she did not have a ID. But it turns out is that she did not have an Indiana driver's license because she had a Florida's driver's license.
She had a what driver's license?
Florida. So it turns out that she was not even a resident of Indiana at all, and she shouldn't have been voting at all. So the law worked. Now, it wasn't voter fraud because she thought she could vote in Indiana.
She wasn't trying to vote in two states.
She wasn't committing voter fraud, but at the same time, she should have been voting in Florida and not Indiana. So one of the plaintiff's own cited plaintiffs showed that the law worked. But the other point being, Stevens, who, as you mentioned before, was the liberal justice switching over that gave the conservatives their 6-3 majority, he grew up in Chicago. He saw the voter fraud happen in Daley's regime. So for him, it's very fresh, very real. Chicago, as voters are finding out now that the Indiana primary is going on, is very, very close to Indiana.
But he didn't have any evidence of Chicago of the specific kind of voter fraud where a false photographic ID is used.
Not of that specific one, but is of the voter fraud.
That's the law we're talking about.
But there are instances. Actually, we have here at Heritage, one of our visiting fellows is Hans von Spakowski, who is the upheld. He's being upheld. He's being held back from by the Senate to the FEC Commission, which has in fact completely rendered them powerless, which we're kind of for. So it's very confusing what our position is on it. But no, we want him to be appointed. But anyways, he wrote a paper recently for us documenting cases of voter fraud throughout the country, most recently in New Jersey and Mississippi in 2007, and not in the paper, but just recently in Utah, there was a voter fraud case that had to do with absentee ballots. So voter fraud happens a lot, and it's
somehow it doesn't make its way into Justice Stevens' brief. Opinion, I should say.
Well, I'm not responsible for Justice Stevens' briefs, but I.
Well, it may indicate that so-called evidence is not very strong.
Well, I'll provide the links, and Blogging Heads viewers, as they do, can check out the evidence for themselves.
Fair enough. But certainly it does speak to the importance of the court. It speaks to the importance of folks like Alito and Roberts, who were billed as being straight shooters, just calling balls and strikes, that arguably have more of a political agenda. And that's why presidential elections are so important.
Very true. They are important. I think that's a good place to end.
All right,
Bill.
Great to see you again.
Great talking to you.
We'll do it in. You'll be doing it next week with some guest to be determined, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. Take care.